guys? We good? There it is. It just started. So you guys will get this recording of this call and this conversation along with any of the deck graphics that we put up on the screen share. So just be aware of that. You'll get a follow-up email either later today or early tomorrow morning from Tori. And so just be aware of that. Here's how we normally run these calls, because there's a lot of you guys on here. There's a lot of different areas where we're trying to engage. We want you, one of the things at Growmentum that we try to do, that those of you guys that are part of this network, we always talk about work on it, right? And not just in it. I just got done in Texas last week with, or yesterday with a team. And so our goal on these calls is actually unapologetically to have you guys pause and to go, okay, we're going to work on it for 60 minutes. And not just in it. And what we mean by that is that the natural drift of everything that we do as leaders will always be to the in it. It won't be to the on it. So even if you try to go, hey, we're going to do this, or we need to talk about the bigger vision and all of that, I would say in most cases, not every case, but in most cases for you guys that are on the call that are executive level leaders, whether you're a lead guy or an executive guy, you are going to drift always to the in it. It's just going to happen. And so one of the things that we encourage is, number one, on these calls, we want to be on it with you guys and not too far in it. And secondly, we want to make sure that you guys are following a rhythm of on it. So if you're not currently setting aside a specific rhythm, as you get back into the fall, our strong encouragement to you would be to figure out that rhythm where your team is going to work on it. And some of the tools even that we've given you, or tools that you pull in from other places to do that. We always say this, guys. We always say it's really hard to work on it and in it in the same space or the same meeting rhythm. So if you're trying to do that, like 20 minutes of on it and 40 minutes of in it, maybe it works for you. You're amazing. But what we found is most of the people will, what will happen is, just like in life or in leadership, we will drift to the in it. And so we would encourage you, whatever your rhythm is, if you're doing a staff meeting every week, if you're doing monthlies, whatever you're doing, that you set aside a dedicated 60 plus minutes to going, we're going to be on it. So that's my spiel for you guys. Has nothing to do with today, except that we're going to do two things today. We're going to do a little personal leadership development, and Kay's going to share a little bit about something that he's been sharing with teams that potentially both for you and then for you to pass on to your team could be helpful. And then we're going to pivot really hard, which is what we do. We're going to pivot really hard, and we're going to have some conversation around increased and accelerated engagement as we continue to lean into the idea that engagement is the new attendance. We're going to lean into that. We're going to talk about some stuff we're discovering there. And then we've got Kenny, who's on here, that we'll introduce in a little bit, who's going to share some of the stuff that he's doing in his world. And Kenny's become a friend of ours, but I'll save Kenny for a little bit later. So that's the role. So, yeah, I'm your friend. Mute him, host, mute, do that thing that we do with Zoom. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Kay, and then we'll move through. Before we do that, though, I want to get this, because some of you guys have to jump off before we get done, or we run a little long and you have to go. I want to make sure we talk about the live event that we're doing in October and not save it to the end. A lot of you guys have already registered. This is something we did in Vegas last year, and it was a huge success. And we've texted some of you guys personally. Maybe some of you we don't know personally yet. We'd love to. We want to invite you to come to Vegas, right? Hang out with this group and spend some time with executive level leaders. I know you guys have plenty of conference opportunities and one days. This is a little bit unique because it has a Growmentum flair. It has the flair of, we're going to spend time replenishing. We're going to give you guys time that we plan to replenish. And we're going to spend, we're going to feed you guys a little bit. We're going to treat you guys a little bit. We're going to spoil you a little bit. But secondly, we are going to spend about 6 or 7 hours on the middle day, really doing what we do here on the call, but an extended season of sitting in the room together and working on it. So this is for executive level leaders. This isn't for you to bring your whole entire team, but if you have an executive team, a lead guy, you're a lead guy, you want to bring your XP, we would love for you to do that. We limit it, excuse me. It's not huge. And right now we're about 60% full. So we would encourage you, I think Kay, you can unmute and hit in the chat if you want. I think Kay actually put the little discount thing down there. So if you register with that Work On It discount code, it's going to give you a discount, $50 off. We're not really, what you guys are registering is just taking care of what we're doing at the event. So it's really the cost of it. But we do have a sponsor that's sponsoring golf. So if you're a golfer, we started out with 12 spots. We now have 28 spots for you to golf, and the golf is taken care of. We also have a cabana at the Bellagio pool on Friday for you to come hang out by the pool, or if you want to do something else in Vegas on that day, you can do that. Anyway, I've said way too much, but you need to register because the space is going to fill up and you're going to be bummed. And so register, pass the link along, and let's get a great team here. We want it to be intimate, but we want to spoil you guys a little bit and allow you to have some time to work on it. So it's October 12th, which is a Wednesday. It starts on Wednesday night, so you can fly in Wednesday, all day Thursday, Friday morning, and through the most of the day is our kind of replenishment day. And you can even fly out Friday night if it's important for you to get home. But worst case, Saturday to come. A few guys have told me they're coming in early with their spouses to take advantage of the whatever there is to do in Vegas. I have no idea, but they're going to do some stuff. So there you go. All right, cool. Okay, you're up, bud.
Yeah, so
one
of the things that we talked about, Lee, as he was setting it up, was the personal development time. So the question that Lee and I sometimes get, and some of you guys I get this all the time with your pastor network friends and church leaders and all that, those type of people, is that you might get a text and say, hey, I'm doing a leadership talk, or I'm doing a staff meeting, I'm doing a leadership talk. What should I share, right? Like, is there a podcast I should share, or is there a principle or a tool or something? What can I share? And so we want to be as practical as possible. Maybe this might be something that you want to share with your team, with your staff in the summer. So it's called Johari Window. Maybe you've heard of it, but basically it's a very simple framework, and yet it's pretty profound in the way that it can actually be used. And if we think about from a self-leadership perspective, the Johari window, it looks like this, and it's a window. So you see 4 panels there. And the reason why it's called the Johari window is they came up with this very, very sophisticated naming around it, because there was 2 American psychologists, Joe and Harry. And so they combined their names, and so it's called the Johari or Johari
Wow,
window.
wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so there's some information for you. So anyway, if you look at the quadrants, on the top part is known by self and unknown by self. And on the left side, you'll see known by others and unknown by others. Or another way to say this is, if you focus on the top left quadrant, there are certain things in our leadership, in our characteristics, our character traits. There are certain things that are known by myself and that are known by others. We call that the open area, or open spot. This is really important. In fact, the name of the game, as Johari would say, is to be able to create this open spot, this open area, as large as possible. Because the more that people can know about you, your strengths and weaknesses, and the more that we can be aware about our own strengths and weaknesses, the better we are. The one that we've probably heard before is also known by others, but not known by me. If it's unknown by myself, and yet other people know this about it, this is the blind area. Or many times you've heard the phrase blind spots, right? Because that's in the negative connotation usually. But this could be very, very positive as well, right? Like, there's certain things that other people know about ourselves, and yet we need to know about that, because in a positive or a negative way. And so how do we identify, how do we learn, how do we grow in understanding those type of things? Okay, so that's the unknown self to known by others. The third one is where it's known by us, but it's unknown by others. This is the hidden area. This is something somebody probably needs. Thank you. All right. The known by, it's something that I know about myself, but yet at the same time, other people do not. It could actually be insecurities. It could be in the negative way, or it could be positive ways, like things that I'm a great dancer. Nobody knows that, right? So those are things, talents, gifts, characteristics, things that I know about myself, but other people do not know about myself. And then the last one in the last quadrant is unknown by self and unknown by others. This is called the hidden area. Or another way to say this is that I don't know it. They don't know it. Only God knows it, right? And so this is the unknown category. And obviously, what we're trying to do is make that as small as possible. So the reason why I think this is a pretty nice tool to be able to even navigate one-on-one conversations or even set it up as a staff meeting or those type of things is because it helps us to be able to define some of the conversations or talking points that we can have with different staff members, and maybe be able to have conversations that's like, maybe this is something that I know about you or other people know about you, but you don't know about yourself. And what does that actually look like? And so one of the principles of the Johari windows is actually to be able to say, how can we get the open box larger by two ways? Number one, by making the hidden area smaller, which means how do I help people discover who I truly am? And that could be, when you think about your direct reports, when you think about the people that are in your organization, and there are a lot of things that we don't know about the individual, well, they should have a responsibility to be able to share and be able to open up on those type of things. So that is a way in which they can actually share, and that hidden box of what they know about themselves, but what other people don't know about themselves can be grown. But the other area, obviously, is how do we close that blind spot or blind area too? And so the way that we do that and enlarge that open box is, what can we do to be able to get the feedback that we need, positive and negative, so that way we can actually grow that. So one of the questions, that is a dynamic question around this to be able to, especially for that box that you might have heard before, is, what is it like to be on the other side of me? What is it like to be on the other side of me? This is a great question. Sometimes a great question to ask your spouse, or maybe not if you don't really want to know. But what is it truly like to be on the other side of me? And from a direct report, from a supervisor, from a coworker, from all those type of relationships, from parents, what is it like to be on the other side of me? And I think this is a really, really great question to be able to expand your open box and actually make that hidden box better. There's another one. Yep.
No, I'm just going to ask you a question, and maybe you covered it and I missed it because I wasn't as focused as I should have been. When you look at that box, and maybe you're going to talk about this in a second, can you explain to these guys how you've used this with teams? Like, how do you actually do that with teams? Like, how would you go about presenting this if they're going to take this? Because Chris asked in the chat, are we going to get this? Yeah, of course, you're going to get all this. Explain a little bit, like, I know you just did this last week, like, how do you go about it? You don't just throw it up there. So what do you do?
Yeah, and that's the last thing that I'll share, and it will be in the deck. But basically, when you think about this, first of all, it's a conversation tool for your one-on-ones, for your staff meetings. But the other way to be able to do this is, we just did this with a couple of churches, print out a sheet like this that has a lot of different adjectives, right? And so now what you're doing with these adjectives is you're saying, all right, circle the top 5 of what describes you, so that way you can baseline that to say, this is what I know about myself. And then you would have them do this for each team member around the table. So if you got like 6 lead team members, or however, whatever group size or department, ministry, whatever it might be, and then have them do it for each individual, and then cross-reference that. And you can imagine if it actually aligns and you agree, and it says that it's what you said about yourself and what other people said about you, then that's in the open category. And if it's something that you said, but then nobody else said, then that's in the hidden category. And
okay, does it get screwy when you do this? Like, do people get weird about it? Or do they actually like embrace it? Like, does it get kind of awkward?
Because, well, first of all, most of these adjectives are positive, right? And so there's actually an exercise, I think, that you can use negative adjectives if you wanted to. I would probably navigate that, in a different setting in my suggestion, but these are all positives, right? And so we're trying to identify. And so it was actually really good, because the beauty is in the conversation, not in the math of what was in the right boxes and all that type of stuff, right? The beauty is in the conversation. There was a lot of follow-up conversations to be able to say, hey, You said this about yourself, and we haven't seen that. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. So it's a starting ground for some of those conversations. So this will be in the deck that you'll get, but just wanted to share with you maybe something that you can do with your staff, or maybe your one-on-ones that might be helpful.
Okay, what would be the follow-up as you're working through this? So, because I know on this call, knowing some of these guys and gals, that a lot of them are either new in their role or new completely in this, like as somebody who's looking for, hey man, I want to build culture. Is this a tool that you would use to sort of tee up a healthier culture, or are you just using it just to really get people to be authentic, or both?
Yeah, I think both. Yeah, for sure. Because so much of this is really understanding each other. And, I think a lot of you guys would do an Enneagram or a cultural index or thinking wavelength,
Thinking
or all those
wavelength.
different, all those different assessments that we would recommend all of those. And those just help us from a self-awareness perspective to know ourselves, but then for other people to know. And this is just a framework, a very, very simple one to be able to categorize some of those things.
Cool. And because we talk a lot about alignment with all of our conversations, and you guys have had those alignment conversations, this feels like it's really, when Kay shared this with me, it feels like it's really a tool to bring some cultural and staff alignment. And as you guys get out of July and get back into August, September, and everything ramps back up and you're going bonkers, part of our reminder that you need to write on a yellow pad or however you do that is like, you can't leave staff culture to chance. You guys know that, you read about it, you read blogs about it, but you can't lead it to chance. It's got to be intentional. So when I'm walking through this with Kay last week, I'm thinking, okay, this is something that needs to happen with our team so that we can then actually do some, call to actions around it, which would be extremely important. Any thoughts or questions on that? Any questions from what Kay shared? Unmute, ask it. If you're completely confused, you've used this, how would you execute it? We'll give you a second or two. Anybody? Awkward small group moment. Cool. All right. Yeah, as Kay said,
I can chime in real quick.
Sorry, go. Please go.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
No, I just like
you,
that it's
Okay.
I guess I should introduce myself. I'm a pastor in North Houston. I've just been pastoring 6 months. After our pastor of 15 years said, I'm out, I'm
Hey,
resigning.
let's do this. Let's just pause and pray for Brandon, right? I'm just kidding.
Feels that way, but I appreciate this resource that you guys offer. So, but I'm also a licensed counselor, and one of the things that I do with clients a lot of time is similar to the team building that you would do, like what you're talking about. I just like this intervention because it's very simple. It's easy for everybody to kind of like understand and maybe kind of process in an hour session. You could probably hit on quite a few of your team and get some good feedback and some personal insight.
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, Brandon. Thanks for being here, bro.
Sure.
Glad you're along for the ride.
I'm enjoying it.
Anybody else want to chime in, or we're going to move? Awesome. All right, let's pivot real hard here from personal development to really some conversation around organizational development. And one of the things that has been a constant, and I've heard it from you guys, we started talking about it, way back when Kay, me, Hick, and a few others of you were on this call before there were so many of us, the idea that as we regathered physically, I know we're not going to talk about that, but as we regathered physically, the idea of one of the learnings is the power of engagement and how we engage. And part of how we started to frame that was through what we call Church on Mission. Many of you guys have started to do that. Okay, you want to put that up real quick? I think I don't have the slide deck in front of me, so I apologize. Yeah, so this is the summary of Church on Mission. So some of you guys that are new to the call, this is going to be a completely different framework for you. Some of you guys that have been around for a while, or we've been with your teams, you're going to be like, yes, we got it. But one of the things that is like, Chris Hall is here on the call. He just sent me a graphic 2 days ago, and Chris is like, we're doing Life on Mission series coming up here in August. So they're taking this construct, these 5 elements of discipleship, and they're actually going to use it as a 5-week series. But for the conversation today around engagement and how do we engage, how are we doing in engaging people? And part of the reason why I'm going to bring Kenny in just a moment to the conversation is this idea of, we believe that engagement needs to be centric, and to the point where if you do not have somebody on your staff that is owning, that is passionate, it could be a part of their role, but it needs to be a designated role along with across the board and understanding of this. You need to go back and look at it, because we can't just keep doing stuff the same way we've been doing it and cranking out ministry and filling up our calendar with all sorts of stuff and hoping that it hits. We've got to work on it so that it gets intentional. So we have these 5 elements that are there, and we have 2 different parts of this, one that we call a pathway and the others that we call a pipeline. And the reason we differentiate that is because as it's very likely, very strongly likely that most of the people that will still connect with your church, whether it's in person or online, will still do that through some sort of a gathering. They will attend through a gathering. And so we believe that you need to, from your gathering, create a pathway, which by nature describes sort of an invitation. Hey, take steps. Many of you have things like, we have a pathway or we have a next steps process. That's all great. This larger part of the Church on Mission is a pathway. The others are pipelines. And the reason we describe them as pipelines is because we believe that those are ones that we want to push a little bit, that we want to add a little inertia to people and give them clear steps to move along. And this is not a lack of simplicity. This is actually a lean into intentionality. And so you can take this and you can begin to work with it with your team. If you go to the next slide, I don't know who's controlling the deck. I think it's Kay. These are just a descriptor of those 5 elements. We believe that they really talk about discipleship, each of them. Gather purposefully. We embrace a normal rhythm of worship. It's vertical and horizontal. And the purposefully word matters, that we want to connect deeply, that we want to connect people, whatever the method is, groups, etc. We don't care. It's more about how are we doing that and pipelining people. We want to equip people to serve selflessly. We want to talk about the idea of being individuals who give generously. We believe that's finance, starts with finance. It's not just be generous, it's be generous with that. And then lastly, influence daily, which most of you have heard me talk about extensively, that because I get all excited about it and go crazy. But influence daily is really, how is your faith being lived out and influencing your daily world that God has placed you in? It's the idea of, I'm going to be salt of the earth. I'm going to be light of the world. This is the toughest one to measure. And it's also the one that actually is the most important, because if you look at these 5 that are on your screen right now, guys, the 4 of those can actually just be easily checked off by someone who actually isn't progressing in their faith, isn't finding and following Jesus in a strong way, isn't discovering Jesus in their journey, whatever your mission statement of Matthew 28 is. The influence daily one, you can't fake it. It's really an indicator of, how is my faith being played out? And so these 5 elements really make up what we call Church on Mission. And we believe that our role as we lead churches is to equip and to motivate and accelerate our staff to go, hey, how are we engaging people in this way? And so that's the difference between the pathways and the pipelines. If you have questions, just unmute and interrupt me, because I'm just going to go for a second before I give Kenny. One of the things that we do with teams is we actually ask them to rank themselves. I think it's on the next slide, Kay. I apologize that I'm not up to speed on the slide as I'm sitting here, but it's basically putting this in front of our teams and going, where are we? Snapshot of today. That's what the little circles are that we put on this slide deck for you, is to actually ask, in the 5 specific areas, and you may use different terms, you may have different ways of saying it, but we would encourage you to direct them towards engagement. Where are we today as far as gathering purposely, connecting deeply, serving selflessly, influence daily, give to me? And where are we as far as an intentional, specific pathway and intentional, specific pipelines? Green is like, we're killing it. Like we're watching people see that. Our metrics, not just anecdotally, but our metrics tell us that. Yellow is a bit of slow, like caution, yield, pay attention. And red is like flashing, like we've got to do something, because if we continue down this path, these things are not going to be true of people. All right. Questions around Church on Mission. I'm only resetting and re-teeing that up. Angel said, can you define a pipeline? I think it's actually on here, Kay. The pipeline, it's basically going, what is the destination? It starts with defining the destination, right? All the way at the end. Like if you think about, there it is. Thank you, Kay. If you think about serve selflessly in your church context, and you think about who is an individual literally who personifies the destination you would want, not just they show up and they serving kids, but like, man, they're holistically living out what it is to serve selflessly. We always encourage people to use that and those characteristics as a destination. What does that look like practically? And reverse engineer back. What would it look like from a pre-engagement to a step, to a second step, typically to a destination, and then even define what is the deeper engagement. So Angel, that's what a pipeline really looks like. To move through and to make that something that's actually working and moving quickly. Kay, do you want to talk about Hick? And I know what Hick's asking me on chat, but I'll just throw it out there. You want to? I don't want to sideline us because I want to throw it to Kenny here in a second. But Kay, can you give us some basic? Go back to the Church on Mission. Can you give us some basic metrics? And I'm throwing this to you without any kind of a tee up. Basic metrics that you're seeing churches look at around these areas as far as dashboards and scorecards on these particular areas. You want to talk about that a little bit? I know we're wrestling with that with a lot of the guys on the call right now, what that looks like.
Yeah, as far as the dashboards and metrics, let's say, for example, if you have an engagement pipeline, the interesting thing about this is once you determine your destination, then you reverse engineer that to be able to say what are easier steps in which you can get people into those destinations. So let's say, for example, if your destination is for serve selflessly, is for people to serve every week or 3 times a month or whatever it might be. Well, then what we're finding out more than ever before, right, is that volunteerism is very, very tough, post-COVID, and children's ministries are always looking for children's, volunteers. So what are some step 1, step 2 opportunities that actually are easier steps for them to be able to get to that destination? Well, so then when you come to the measurement part of that is that starting to measure, all right, once you establish your step 1, step 2 destination, we've created engagement pipeline dashboards to be able to say, all right, how many people are coming in through this flow, because it's just like any intake. If your intake is actually small, then actually, at the end, it's going to be even smaller. And so that would be the measurement in which we would recommend some of those things. The other last thing that I would mention is that when you talk about the church engagement, it's not just measuring one, but it's actually measuring the combination, the plus ones and the plus twos. So if someone is connected and serving, they're much, much more likely to stay engaged. Their stickiness factor goes out the roof. Or another way to say this is that if someone's actually already engaged in some point, they're much, much more likely to engage in another than somebody who's never engaged. And so those would be some things that you would measure to be able to see where you're at.
So some of the metrics are defined. If Kay moves forward in the deck, some of them will be defined along the way, right? So as you build, like this is, I don't want to get into this again today, but as you look at this serve selflessly example we would actually, and have actually, where I'm boots on the ground, have built out goals around moving people through that, right? So it's not just how many people are serving, but how are we moving people through that? And I know this gets a little bit into the minutia, you guys, but it's the work on it that then leads to the work in it. So we can see, we're just pushing really hard against what I call the turn up the radio leadership tendency, right? Like, I don't want to know my car's making noise. I'm just going to turn up the radio and ignore it. And we just see that way too much. And so it's not that we want to create metrics that tell us we suck. We want to create metrics that we can actually build some intentionality around and celebrate the wins. Let me show you some metrics here before I introduce Kenny. This is kind of a new idea that I want to put out to you guys around these pipelines and pathways. And I'll let Kay speak to this as well. Beginning of the year, one of the things we started doing, here at the Crossing, and then with some of our Grow Minimum clients, is we actually started asking them to go back and to look at data, what we call data ads. And some of you that are metrics geeks are like totally freaking out right now, like, woo, you're very excited. But here's the thing is, we thought, let's look at where people hit our database. Maybe some of you are already doing this, but this was not something we were actually looking at. I don't mean like that we didn't have, we weren't actually as a leadership team looking at, and it has been pretty crucial as we've actually created a staff position that's leading out engagement alongside assimilation. What I mean by that, when I say data ads, most of you, your database, whether it's Rock, Planning Center, CB, if people are using that, whatever you're using, most of you guys are at the point where your database kind of drives engagement, because most of the things you do, anything that someone does as they identify themselves, as they become an identifier, is going to happen because of the database. So you're looking at our May summary from the Crossing in Las Vegas. Literally, I'm just putting it up there for you. Basically, this is all of our data, where our data ads were. And there's some interesting things here. And I want Kenny in a second to speak to this that we've discovered. A couple things. Number one is you can see where people hit our database for the very first time. So my comment number one would be the connect line that you see where it says 18.4%. That is what you guys would normally define probably as your pathway. You stand on stage, hey, you're new today, fill out a connect card, blah, blah, blah. That for us is a little under 20% of where our data ads are coming from. I don't think that's terrible. I just think it's interesting because all of us put so much energy into fill out that card and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of our systems, our pathway is based on somebody filling out that card. And we're discovering that only about 18 out of 100 first touches are coming from the card. You can see that a little under 10% come from a first give, 40% come from our child check-in. They're having to enter themselves in there. 6% come from some sort of a care group. I think it's interesting that about 14% come from some sort of what we would call an event. They sign up for a group, the FPU, they go to Rooted, they take some sort of a thing that forces them to actually sign up. You say, so Lee, that's great. Why are you sharing all of this with us? Because we're starting to pay attention to this because we want to widen our engagement strategy to actually speak algorithmically to these areas. In other words, if someone gives and that's their first time that they're actually engaging with us, we need to not only encourage a second give, encourage all of that, but we also need to understand that this is an opportunity for us to connect and engage them deeper. And I think I would just encourage you guys as you look at this to kind of go, okay, are we just paying attention to the 18.4% that are writing or filling out our digital connection card, or do we have a little bit of a wider strategy that speaks to everywhere where we are getting personal touches that are actually there? Kay, you want to add to that before Kenny comes in hard?
Yeah, as intentional as you are with your connection card follow-up strategy, I think the next tier that people think about is, oh, they're coming in through kids check-in. We better follow up on those people too. That's the next level. But then there's a lot of different ways. As we started measuring this at Real Life, I mean, it's pretty crazy. And to be able to, and what we were doing absolutely nothing for those individuals who actually got into our database for the first time. And so now we're much more strategic about that and leveraging that information. So one way is to just measure that in the beginning, and then secondarily to be able to then put strategies around that to be able to say, hey, how can we be more strategic at follow-ups around that?
It got our attention, you guys, big time. As far as like, what do we need to be doing? You think about algorithmically on social media, et cetera, how things are targeted. Unfortunately, I think in the church, we've for too long kind of targeted one particular like entry point and one particular type of individual, and not understood that unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to be forced as we try to change the world and use the gospel to do that, we're going to be forced to actually be a little bit more personal and a little bit more specific as people touch us for the first time in how we engage them and how we make that happen. Anybody want to unmute and speak to that at all? or maybe your own context? Or is this helpful?
Hey, I have a question. On that 2.8%, trips and events, I'm just curious, at your events, how intentional are you about even trying to gather information from people that come to events?
Kyle, in our case, we would be intentional. It would probably come through the Connect card, right? Even at those events. I think what that signifies on this chart you're looking at is someone signed up for an event, i.e., you're doing a Mom's Day Out thing at your church on a Saturday. That would be an indicator, I believe, on that sheet of they signed up for something. Does that make sense? So they were not in our system before they signed up to attend something. So it's a little bit different than what you're speaking to, but we would drive to Connect Card, and I'm not being anti-Connect Card. I hope you guys are not feeling that. It's just, I think we need to be realistic about if only 18% of our touches are coming from the Connect Card, we better be wider in our strategy.
And to follow up with that, I think maybe what I'm asking too is like, so for your events, are you always trying to get people to sign up in advance if they're coming to something, like as you advertise it, or okay, not necessarily?
Not necessarily, but I think a lot of stuff just drives that. If there's a registration, if they got to pay, if they've got to do any of that, I think it just naturally drives through our Rock database that we're using. Literally everything, you click on the link, it's gonna make them get in our database.
Yeah, what's interesting is, Kyle, is once we started doing this at Real Life Church, we have multi-campuses, and the campus pastors started grabbing onto this, and they got really creative. It says, all right, if we were to think strategically about how do we actually get somebody to get into our database for the first time, let's say, for example, Easter egg hunt, right? They just did, an Easter egg hunt. Normally, you just have anybody come, and it's just an awareness event and all those type of things. Well, we actually had a waiver form that they had to sign. And on that waiver form, it actually said, and if you'd like more information about the church, check. Well, it was such an easy thing for them, especially on their phone. And we got a lot of people into the database because of it. So you can actually get really creative once you start thinking this way.
Thank you. That's really helpful. You didn't want anybody to sue the church if they pulled a hamstring chasing down some eggs? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, but it's great. But it's also like leveraging it. Yeah, it's like leveraging it to get that first touch. Let me do this. I'm gonna kind of throw it to Kay a little bit. So Kenny's on here. Kenny is a good friend of Kay and ours. Maybe some of you know him. And Kenny, we wanted to bring in specifically on this topic. And I asked Kenny to really speak for the time that we have remaining around his expertise around, and maybe we'll just go back and forth with you, Kay and I, Kenny, around this idea of how do you make this personal? So if you're looking at that sheet, that Kay, you can put it back up if you want. If you're looking at that sheet that I just put up and you're seeing those touch points, as somebody and you can introduce yourself a little bit, Kenny, and what you do, as somebody who's looking at that, what's your response? How would you tell these guys, like in my area of like follow-up and personal follow-up, what would that look like? So Kenny, we don't want to waste a ton of time with intro, but give them an intro and then tell me what you would tell these guys, like this needs to be happening.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It seems like I stumbled.
Kenny does win best background. It's great. You have a great background.
It seems like you guys are brass tacks type of group. I love it. I run a digital agency helping with content marketing for ministries, nonprofits, and churches. We run a bunch of programs for executive pastors, etc. And I love the stuff that these guys are doing here. One of the things that I would say off the cuff, Lee, is the one concept in e-commerce and digital that I think ministry leaders don't understand or get, or it's not on their radar, is in e-commerce. If you look at Amazon, if you look at all the successful online stores, etc., is most ministries that come to me, they want traffic. Like they want to figure out how are we supposed to get eyeballs onto our website? How do we get more people in the door? But really what has to happen first, and this is an e-commerce principle, is you have to have a conversion point. You have to optimize the conversion. And then only after you have that optimized and you have confidence in that it actually sells, it actually works, then that's when you bring in traffic. I think in a very similar way, looking at all these things across the board on this Excel sheet, is I would seriously re-look at all the different ministry fronts, whether it's check-ins or first-time giving, connection cards, and really look at that call to action. And are you really, really optimized in whatever percentage that you're getting for, say, connection cards? Are you really getting the maximum that you can for whatever it is, kids check-ins?
Kenny, unpack call to action. I mean, we all know what that is, but when you look at this spreadsheet on here, when you're saying like individually, you would be thinking through a call to action where that touch point is. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So first time giving, right? Like if we're trying to trigger first time giving, which is up there with repeat giving, recurring giving. For that, are you making it? Have you actually done the hard work of looking at it from the other person's point of view, right? We call it, instead of first time visitor ministries, we call it stranger ministries. When people come into your church, they're not your guests, they're not your visitors, you are strangers to them. In fact, most of the times when they come in, everyone in the church is in a holy huddle and they're not friendly. We call ourselves Christians, but to be very honest, we're not welcoming to the actual newcomer that comes into the building for the first time. It's the same thing here, even with giving. Are you making the invitation so ripe that they're actually going to figure out, wow, I need to figure out how to get part of it? So,
Kenny, brass taps though, what is that? When you talk about it being personal, right? Because right now everybody's excited about that, right? Like everything needs to be personal. People need to feel that. What are you literally seeing from a church nonprofit perspective that can help these guys that are on the call that are going, you're fire hosing me with this. I'm going to go pull this data right now. Really, like what are they, what's the first like minimum thing? I don't have a big staff. I don't have a comm department. What am I doing?
Yeah. So one of the fundamental things you need to do first is testimonials. You need to build a testimonial engine. You need to build a culture in your staff, in your teams, to actually capture really good experiences so that you can humanize that experience and that call to action. You're going to match testimonials against the call to actions. When you're going to give, you need to match it with stories of giving. Not just stories of transformation on the recipient side, like, oh, we gave to a homeless shelter, and you want to tell those stories where the homeless shelter, that was the transformation. But you also want to show the stories of, I've actually never given before. Growing up, I was always into buying the latest, Air Jordans and the latest iPhone, but I realized there's more to that, right? And then telling those stories of how giving has actually impacted you as an individual in your identity and then your faith. Telling testimonials is the one of the things that we don't do well enough in the church, and then mapping it to each of the calls to action. We know that it's natural when we're trying to sell VBS call to actions. Sign up for VBS. You show pictures of happy kids, right? Sign up for the next trip to Israel. You sign up for a testimonial that says, oh, this has been life transformative. I understand the Bible now, etc. But we don't do that for all of the things that are out there, whether it be for prayer meetings, for baptisms, that next step, getting people to have a profession of faith and then get to the baptism. You can increase your baptism rate by using testimonials. You want to personalize and humanize every single ministry front and call to action as much as possible. I think this is something that
I think you would push that out. You would push that out digitally as well to those that are capable or able to do that.
You need to do
I'm
that.
assuming that
everywhere. Yes. So we have a thing called paparazzi previews. So the idea is that we put up these websites with beautiful stock photography, really clean people, shaking hands, friendly. But what we're not showing is the actual church life. We're not showing, how am I supposed to dress when I come to your events? What type of people are there? Are they all just old fogies, or are they all just like 20-year-olds? Do I
easy,
fit in?
Kenny, easy.
Right? And so that paparazzi preview is that concept. What do paparazzi do? They leave no stone unturned to the imagination, right? Like they literally show you everything. When you're making a decision to come to an event, to come to a program, to come to Sunday, you want to use social, your website, emails, all these things to be able to show and display, put on display, show, not tell, all the things that are vibrant and dynamic about your church. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Kenny, what would you say? I mean, because again, we like these calls, just be candid, whatever. What would you say to guys that are listening to you right now? But two things. Number one is they're like, I have no margin. My team has no margin to pay attention to this. So that's number one. And number two, this feels like Kenny's telling me to market. How would you, because we talk about it, Grow Momentum, we always say, be led of the Spirit, be aware of the strategy. So how would you respond to somebody who goes, that just sounds like marketing? That sounds dirty to me. How would you respond?
Yeah, I think
you're like, yeah, it's dirty. No, I'm just kidding.
The pushback I would say is, this isn't marketing. This is at the end of the relationship development. That if you understand that what we do in marketing, in external communications, in social media, in email, emails, sequences, all that stuff. If you forget the fact that you're not trying to build a relationship and use technology to scale personal relationships, then you've lost it, and that's when it becomes dirty, right? Screens are the new mission field. Like, you have to understand that most people, they don't want to be on the social and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? Where are your people literally spending their time for hours and hours and hours? I challenge every single one of you to go into your phone and tell me and show me a screenshot of the iPhone screen that shows how many hours per day on average you've spent on your phone in the last week. People are actually, it's Netflix Nation, right? And so the website is your front door. Screens are the mission field. You need to actually put out content, and then the quality of the content needs to be really thought through in a way that, what if you didn't have a captive audience? I think this is why the church is failing. We are used to a captive audience where people come in the room, we can lock the door, sermon preaches for an hour, you get a nice nap for 45 minutes, and then they leave, right? That's a captive audience. But now we're in this omni-channel life where we're on all these devices, we're all over the place. The relationship is across multiple channels. And what we need to understand is we need to get to the WIFM. Why should I come to your church? Why should I clear my calendar and get to your church and build a relationship and do something? Why should I fill out a connection card? Right? Why? What's that WIFM? The what's in it for me?
Okay.
I think that's...
So you're feeling like the pushback, it sounds like pure and holy, but in some ways actually is just gonna mess with the mission that we might have.
Yeah. And then to answer that other question, I think it's an 80-20 rule. I think if you actually did an audit of any staff member that says they are too much on their plate and they can't get to any of this stuff, that you can actually take some time to audit all of their activities and reprioritize and sequence what they're supposed to do, and realize that there's stuff that they can shed. It's time for pairing, because this is the stuff that's really high leverage, highly strategic, and at the end of the day, it really actually provides. And the other answer is, Lee, is it provides opportunities to you bring in more specialized volunteer opportunities.
Okay, fair, right? It doesn't have to be staff. It could be people sitting right under our.
I'll give you
Kay talks. One. I've been with Kay all the time, and he talks to teams about that all the time. And every time he says it, I always forget about it. But he's like, it's not more stuff for staff if we can actually leverage people.
Yeah. Again, you think you're doing stuff that's important, but it may not be. One of the biggest things that I think you could do for your church in this season is hire a mystery worshiper, like a secret shopper. Hire a company to do that. Come in and actually tell. There's one company I know that uses people off of Craigslist. So it's not a church leader, a church specialist, right? They actually hire people off of Craigslist who've not been to a church recently to come in, actually shop your church, and then have candid feedback coming back out. And you'll be amazed at that type of raw feedback from someone who's really in your community, in your zip code, who might be curious enough to actually get hired for a mystery shopping thing, and then give you candid feedback. That exercise alone is eye-opening for people to understand. Wow, we were doing all this stuff, and that actually doesn't matter.
Right.
You can repurpose those hours.
Yeah, we got to wrap up here in just a second. This is great, Kenny. Seriously, this is gold stuff.
One last second. One last comment.
Okay.
I think this is important.
30 seconds. The music's playing. I'm cutting you off.
On the social, on the digital, this is my rant. I bet if I come to your website, every one of your church's website, it's
Easy,
the
Kenny,
80-20 rule.
easy.
80% of them, does it require me to actually come to your church to really understand about Jesus? Or if I'm really in if I have a felt need, hard season of life, and I really just want to learn about Jesus, does your website allow me to actually learn and really figure out a pathway to learn without requiring me to come to your church?
Yeah.
Many sites don't
and
even have a Jesus page or a Jesus section on their site, right?
Gotcha.
And I would challenge you to start thinking through that, because where do people go when they first have questions about faith or Jesus or church or anything? Google. They go to your
I'm going to ask
website,
you something, Kenny,
and then you
for
just have
30
to go
seconds.
plan a visit.
I'm going to ask you something for Kenny for 30 seconds, and you guys can DM Kenny on the chat real quick if you want to. But Kenny, one of Hick was asking on the chat, just the idea of, we always hear about noise and how much communication there is out there. And so partly where we made the third lane of this, when I asked like the pushback, is like, what's the danger of we're just creating more noise? I don't hear you saying that. You may be saying we just need to create the right noise. Maybe I'm answering the question,
Right.
But what would your response be to that? The noise question. You got 10 seconds.
I think you need to audit what you're saying, and you can change the melody, and that melody would get through faster, quicker, more impactful. You need to start to talk to people directly with what they want, not what you think they want. It's relationship development. It's relationship development.
Which is what we had set out to really talk about, was just the idea of, everyone's excited about making things more personal, right? Everybody wants personal touch. They want it personally, doing all of that. And so part of why we wanted to bring Kenny on, Kenny is gold, dude. Why we wanted to bring Kenny on was just he could go on for hours, but just talking about how do we make it personal. And it's funny because it sounds impersonal, but what he's really saying is it needs to become personal. It needs to be understanding who the audience is, what are we trying to do, and not make all kinds of crazy assumptions on that. All right. Any last minute questions that you guys have? We have about a minute left. Or Kay, do you want to jump back in and add anything to that at all? Good. Okay, cool. I want to be really respectful of your guys' time, and I know the 60 minutes flies by, but I hope this is beneficial to you guys. I trust that it is. Couple thoughts. Let's do this. Couple things. Number one is make sure that you guys, in the email that Tori sends out, she will include Kenny's contact information. And Kenny does have his own thing that he does. But talking to Kenny, that's not his goal or objective of being on here. He just wants to help you guys. And if he can be of a help, I'm sure he would give you a little bit more insight onto what he's talking about. As well as you guys get ready for the fall, let us know if there is anything that you need as you're ramping up and getting ready to work on it for the fall. We would love to help you with that. Okay, you want to put that think tank thing back up, or I guess we don't really have to, but you guys make sure, seriously, we would love to see all of you guys in October. I know you've got other things that you can be a part of. This is one of those things that we just want you guys to come in and chill and relax and have a chance to replenish, but also network with all the little boxes that you see on your screen right now. And so if you can make that work, Kay put a discount code in the chat, and Tori will include it as well. What's it called, Kay? Work on it. Set the discount code. Work on it. So if you go to the Think Tank Live link and put work on it, I think it's $50 off. So make sure you do that. All right, there it is. He put it in there. All right, you guys, appreciate you guys so much. Watch your email. You're going to get all of that. Kenny, thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. You'll get all of this in your email. If you guys need anything, reach out to us. All right, let's go. Work on it. Make it happen.